allowing me to make Mos Espa look the way I had wanted Mos Eisley to look in the episode 4. To have these kinds of strange alien creatures was one of my favorite.
One of the most fun characters to animate, I have to tell you. He, right from the first, when I read the script and read the lines that he was going to be delivering with Qui-Gon, it really made me fall in love with his character. He's cranky, he's got an attitude. He clearly cares for Anakin, but he thinks he's a pretty tough businessman. Technically, he gives us some challenges. He's got that big belly and those wings in the background. So we were worried that the audience wouldn't believe that he could actually fly. We had all kinds of discussions about bumblebees and different birds and what would he look like if he was really flying. George said, well, think of him as he's got some helium in his belly, or that he's, don't think of him as a terrestrial character. He's from a different galaxy. Don't worry about it. So once we've sort of believed in it, then we went along with it, and I think the audience believed in it too.
One of the key elements of this in the introduction of Anakin and the development of Anakin in this film is that I wanted to be a very earnest, very honest, very good-natured person. Just the opposite of the way you think of Darth Vader. The larger story is really how does such a sweet kid like this turn into something as evil as Darth Vader. And I didn't want it to have the obvious, well, he grew up, he was a bad kid to begin with, and he just, part of the story is, how does he become bad? What choices does he make to become bad? Not, well, he was bad to begin with, so it's obvious that that's where it was going to go. So the whole character slant on this film with Anakin was to set him up and develop him and have it be a really positive character. So that in the later movies I can have something to do with him. Jar Jar chases the little droid around. The reactions of the droid, the animators just brought a whole different level to that relationship than what I'd written and what we directed on the set.
For all of those who really like film trivia, there is a prop in this sequence from 2001.
We have this great scene with Qui-Gon and Watto in the backyard where he goes out and starts to try and cut the deal. It's at this point that we find out what a Tidarian is, and that Tidarians, of course, aren't affected by Jedi mind tricks, which is such a fantastic idea. I'm so happy that George came up with that. And it was a fun scene to do. You've got this great actor, and you've got this fantastic voice actor coming together for a really enjoyable scene. This actually was one of the first sequences we did, and these are the very first shots that we finalized in the film. I felt that he was a standalone character enough in this sequence that we could chance it doing it very early on production.
One of the sounds which really helps describe a character and describe the space that he's in is the sound of the wings for Watto flapping. And I thought it might be very complicated at first to try to come up with a sound that had the right perspective and would move at just the right speed, but actually it turned out to be fairly simple. I made a recording of an umbrella opening and then closing, and made a loop of it so it would repeat itself over and over again very fast. And eventually I put it on the keyboard of the synthesizer, so you just press a key and you'd have the fluttering of this umbrella opening and closing.
One of the issues with Watto, of course, was that when he was originally designed, he had 4 tusks, 2 top and 2 bottom, and is worried with all his dialogue whether the audience would actually be able to understand him, because if you imagine your mouth full of those huge teeth and that trunk, that it wouldn't be believable. So we decided to chip off one of his teeth. We had him talk out of his left side of his face, and it gave him all this more personality, and I'm really happy that we ended up doing that.
A film like this adds up to at least the production of 2 movies. One a full-length feature film, the other a full-length animated film. And you get characters like Watto and Jar Jar and others in which you really have to not only shoot the movie, but then edit it together, edit the dialogue together, and then turn over that edited dialogue track to the animation department, and they will then create the character and sync its voice to the pre-recorded track.
So that we're moving into here with Jar Jar in the market leads us to another one of our favorite cameo characters, Sebulba. Sebulba was fantastic on so many different levels. Of course, right from the design, having a character that walks on his hands and has that fantastic face. He was a real joy to animate. Here's a favorite scene of many of the animators here at ILM, Sebulba attacking Jar Jar. It's with Sebulba and Anakin facing off that I'm very proud of and very happy to be associated with. Look at the subtlety in the ears, nostrils, all the dangling parts of him make him look like he's truly in that scene. But at one point Jake sort of moves backwards and we hit him with a frog at that moment to help tie those 2 characters together on the screen. I think very successful.
there's a story here that we're never going to know about between Sebulba and Anakin. The drift of it is that they're sort of rivals and not the best of friends, but you never find out exactly what happened or what was going on. You just get a flavor of what it is, but it really is designed to set up this rivalry that's going to pay off later in the pod race.
It's hard to come by, and of course movie wind has a quality all of its own that you don't often really hear in real life, but I can remember elements of this wind I recorded at Cape Cod, Massachusetts years ago when there was a storm and the wind was blowing through the screen porch in the front of the cottage at the ocean.
This scene is designed to let Anakin see Qui-Gon's lightsaber, which again is a plot point. At the same time, trying to make Anakin kind and friendly to all the locals, and then ultimately set up the major plot progression is that they're going to stay with him for a while. Their lives are going to become intermeshed. I saw these little troglodyte storage bins for grain the first time I scouted locations for episode 4, and I always wanted to use them in the movie. I wanted to use them in episode 4, but there's just no room for them. So when this movie came along, I told Gavin, I said, when you go to Tunisia, go look up these grain storage bins because they're really great, and maybe we can use them for, the slave quarters or something like that. And so I managed to get them back in and, design a whole different kind of living quarter from what I had in the first film.
One of the jobs of sound editing in the film is creating and synchronizing all the motors for the robots, most notably R2-D2 and C-3PO, because they have multiple motors, driving motors, arm and head motors.
Obviously in this shot, this little sequence, we couldn't use Anthony Daniels, but we did have a puppeteer who was attached to this C-3PO, and then we had Anthony Daniels sitting on the left-hand side of the frame doing all of the dialogue.
And here, coming up with the idea that not only is Darth Vader Luke and Leia's father, but he's also 3PO's father. And I thought that was kind of an amusing irony in all of this. And I couldn't resist it. It gives us the opportunity for 3PO to meet R2 for the first time and start what will ultimately become a very long, arduous friendship of sorts.
Well, script, C-3PO was only in a handful of shots. I think it was only 3 or 4 of them. And one of the shots was C-3PO being turned on and leaning up from the table, swinging his feet out and standing up. So I thought, probably the best way to handle this is, rather than try and build some very complicated computer graphic model that would be very heavy because of all those wires and internal structure, that the best thing would be to have a puppet of some kind that we could operate on the set. And then to be able to have him stand up and take a step forward, what if we attach this puppet to the front of a performer? There's a Japanese theater puppetry technique that does that. So we thought we would use that technique, and that painting out the performer would be a painful and time-consuming process, but that we could suffer through it for the 2 or 3 shots that it needed to be in. Well, after we committed to that technique, George decided that this scene would be longer, and that C-3PO would be in this scene and then that scene, and he ended up being in quite a lot of shots. So this painful technique that we came up with, that we thought we'd only have to suffer through a couple of shots on, ended up being many, many shots.
Very first shot, the very first day of episode 1. Very exciting moment for all of us.
Scene. It was very difficult to shoot because it's a very long scene, a lot of dialogue, and each take that we did was about 10 minutes long. The scene ultimately cut itself down to about, 6 or 8 minutes, I think this is. But it's a very complicated scene, and I tried to play it in its entirety. I didn't break it up into pieces. I actually played it all the way through, which was kind of tough on Jake, because he's only 9, 10 years old, and to remember all that dialogue at a 10-minute scene and be able to go all the way through it without stopping is a challenge for anybody. But he did really well.
This is a very tough day. It was very hard for a lot of people, for everybody to concentrate. It was extremely hot in London. But I'll never forget, George came up with the idea of Liam grabbing onto Jar Jar's tongue. And the minute that happened, that just lightened the whole day, and we managed to get through with a great day's work.
From this moment on, Jar Jar has to be quiet. And what happens with computer graphics, and especially some computer graphic animators, mostly the junior ones, if they're so excited to be animating a character in a Star Wars film that they tend to upstage the actors. So trying to get them to make a performance that is believable and